I was 74 years old when I discovered that my own blood had stabbed me in the back. It was a Tuesday morning in March, and I'd driven into town to pick up feed for the chickens. When I returned to the farm, my farm, the land my grandfather Oswin had cleared with his bare hands in 1947, there was a for sale sign stabbed into the earth like a dagger through my heart. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. The bag of feed slipped from my grip and split open across the driveway, scattering grain everywhere. I stood there for what felt like hours, just staring at that sign. Holloway and Sons Real Estate. The phone number gleamed in the afternoon sun, mocking me. My late husband Derek and I had poured 47 years of our lives into this place. We'd raised our daughter Maribel here, watched her grow from a pigtailed girl chasing fireflies to a woman with sharp eyes and sharper ambitions. After Derek passed 3 years ago, this farm became my entire world. Every fence post, every field, every memory embedded in the soil, it was all I had left of him. My chest tightened as I fumbled for my phone and called Maribel. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice clipped and professional. "Mom, I'm in a meeting." I could barely form the words. "There's a for sale sign on the farm," I whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. Then she sighed, actually sighed, like I was bothering her with something trivial. "We need to talk about this later. I'll come by this weekend." The line went dead before I could respond. My daughter had just dismissed me like I was a telemarketer. I walked up to the sign and tried to yank it out of the ground, but my arthritic hands couldn't grip it properly. Tears blurred my vision as I pulled and pulled until my palms were raw. Finally, I gave up and collapsed onto the porch steps where Derek and I used to watch the sunset every evening. The chickens clucked around me, oblivious to the fact that their home, our home, was apparently for sale. I hadn't listed it. I hadn't signed anything. So how in God's name was there a realtor's sign on my property? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through possibilities. Had Maribel done this? She was my only child, my power of attorney for medical decisions, but she had no legal right to sell my property. Unless... My stomach dropped. 6 months ago, she'd brought me a stack of papers to sign. "Just updating your will, Mom," she'd said sweetly, pointing to little sticky tabs marking where I should initial. I'd trusted her. I'd signed without reading every page. What if those papers hadn't been just about my will? The next morning, I drove straight to Holloway and Sons Real Estate in town. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect nails and an impersonal smile, told me the property had been listed by Maribel Gaines, my daughter, acting as the legal owner. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice shaking. She clicked through her computer screen and shook her head. "No mistake, ma'am. The deed transfer was filed with the county 2 months ago." My vision went dark around the edges. 2 months ago. My own daughter had stolen my farm from under me, and I hadn't even known it until yesterday. What did Maribel hide in those papers? Could a daughter really steal her own mother's legacy? Drop a comment below and let me know what you think happened. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Maribel arrived on Saturday afternoon driving her sleek silver BMW, the one she'd bought after her promotion to regional manager at some tech company I could never quite understand. She stepped out wearing designer sunglasses and a white pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. Her husband Jareth followed behind her, scrolling through his phone like he'd rather be anywhere else. They hadn't visited in 4 months, but now that my farm was apparently theirs to sell, they showed up like vultures circling a carcass. I met them on the porch, my arms crossed. Maribel removed her sunglasses and gave me that patronizing smile I'd come to dread. "Mom, let's talk inside. You look upset." Upset? I was beyond upset. I was hollowed out, betrayed, destroyed. But I kept my voice steady. I went to the real estate office, Maribel. They told me you transferred the deed to yourself. They told me you're selling my farm. Her smile didn't falter. Let's sit down and discuss this rationally. You're getting older, and this place is too much for you to handle alone. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Derek and I had shared thousands of meals, where Maribel had done her homework as a child. Jareth poured himself coffee without asking, acting like he owned the place. Which, apparently, he and Maribel believed they did. Mom, you're 74, Maribel began, using that slow, careful tone people use with children. You can barely manage the upkeep here. Last winter, you nearly froze because you forgot to pay the heating bill. That was once. One time I'd been late on a payment because I'd been sick with pneumonia. I didn't forget, I said quietly. I was in the hospital, Maribel. You knew that. She waved her hand dismissively. That's exactly my point. You need to be somewhere with support. We found a beautiful assisted living facility in Madison, Whispering Pines. They have activities, medical staff, everything you need. And the farm sale will more than cover your expenses there for the rest of your life. The rest of my life. She already decided where I'd spend my final years, and it wasn't in the home I'd built with my husband. I looked at Jareth, hoping for some shred of decency, but he just stared at his phone. You had no right, I said, my voice breaking. This is my property. Derek left it to me. Maribel reached across the table and patted my hand like I was a confused child. Actually, Mom, you signed it over to me 6 months ago. Remember those papers? You made me co-owner, and then we completed the transfer last month when we had you declared mentally diminished. It was for your own protection. Mentally diminished. The words hit me like a physical blow. I never agreed to be declared anything, I whispered. Maribel pulled out a folder from her purse and slid it across the table. Inside were medical evaluations, documents signed by Dr. Naoma Pritchard, my own physician, stating I showed signs of cognitive decline and memory loss. I stared at the signatures, the official stamps, the legal language that had stolen my entire life from me. Dr. Pritchard would never, but Maribel cut me off. She's concerned about you, Mom. We all are. The sale closes in 30 days. We've already accepted an offer from a development company. They're going to build a shopping plaza here. Can you believe what Maribel just revealed? A shopping plaza on her mother's sacred land? Comment below, is Maribel evil or just greedy? Like this video if you're Team Grandma, and subscribe. I waited until Monday morning before showing up unannounced at Dr. Naoma Pritchard's clinic. She'd been my physician for 15 years, had treated Derek during his final illness, had held my hand through grief. If anyone would tell me the truth, it would be Naoma. The receptionist tried to tell me I needed an appointment, but I walked straight past her and into Naoma's office. The doctor looked up from her computer, startled, her gray hair pulled back in its usual neat bun. Verna? What's wrong? I slammed the folder onto her desk, medical evaluations spilling across her keyboard. Did you write these? Did you declare me mentally incompetent? Naoma picked up the papers, her face paling as she read. She flipped through page after page, her jaw tightening with each one. Finally, she looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before, anger. Verna, I never wrote these. This isn't my signature. Look, she pulled out her prescription pad and wrote her name. The signature was completely different from what appeared on those documents. My legs gave out, and I sank into the chair across from her desk. Maribel showed me these. She said you evaluated me, said I was declining. Naoma came around the desk and knelt beside me, taking my hands in hers. Verna, listen to me carefully. You came in for your regular checkup 3 months ago. You were perfectly healthy, mentally sharp as ever. I never conducted any cognitive assessment. Someone forged these documents using my name and medical license number. Her words were like oxygen to a drowning woman. I wasn't losing my mind. My daughter had fabricated everything. Can you prove it? I asked desperately. Naoma nodded. I keep detailed records of every patient visit. I'll pull your file right now. She returned to her computer, typing rapidly. Minutes later, she printed out my complete medical history from her practice. Every visit, every prescription, every note, nowhere did it mention cognitive decline or mental incompetence. This is medical fraud, Verna. And identity theft involving a licensed physician. Your daughter could face serious criminal charges for this. The room tilted slightly. My own child was a criminal. A forger. A thief. Naoma made copies of everything and placed them in a manila envelope. You need a lawyer, Verna. A good one. And you need to report this to the county clerk's office immediately. If that deed transfer was based on fraudulent medical documents, it's void. Hope flickered in my chest for the first time since seeing that for sale sign. Maybe I could fight this. Maybe I could save my farm. But then reality crashed back in. Lawyers cost money. Legal battles took time. And the sale closed in 28 days. I thanked Naoma and drove home in a daze, the envelope of proof sitting on my passenger seat like a loaded gun. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Jarrett's truck parked near the barn. I crept around the side of the house and found him inside with 2 men in business suits, measuring the property and taking photographs. The barn comes down first, Jarrett was saying. Then we'll level the fields for the parking lot. The main house can stay until closing, but after that, everything goes. I pressed myself against the barn wall, my heart hammering. They were already planning my home's destruction. Forged documents? Maribel is playing dirty. Hit that like button if you think Verna should fight back hard. Drop a comment, what would you do in her situation? Subscribe now. I found Lowell Tate through a recommendation from Naoma's receptionist, whose sister had used him in a nasty divorce. His office was above a hardware store in downtown Millbrook, up a narrow staircase that made my knees ache. But when I walked into his cramped office filled with legal books and yellowing case files, I knew I'd found the right person. Lowell was maybe 60, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. He listened to my entire story without interrupting once, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, I slid Naoma's envelope across his desk. Lowell examined every document carefully, his expression growing darker with each page. Finally, he sat back in his chair and folded his hands. Mrs. Crane, what your daughter did is called elder fraud. She forged medical documents, filed false paperwork with the county, and transferred property through deception. This is criminal. His words should have made me feel vindicated, but instead, I just felt empty. My daughter wasn't just greedy, she was a criminal who'd targeted her own mother. Can you stop the sale? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Lowell tapped his pen against the desk. We can try. I'll file an emergency injunction with the court to halt the sale pending investigation. But I need to be honest with you, these cases move slowly, and your daughter has already set legal mechanisms in motion. We're racing against time. He paused, studying my face. There's something else you should know. I pulled the public records on the property sale. The buyer is Cascade Development Corporation. They're offering $2.8 million for your land. The number hit me like a sledgehammer. 2.8 million. My little farm, worth that much? Lowell nodded at my shock. Your property sits at the intersection of two major highways. Prime commercial real estate. Your daughter knew exactly what she was doing. Maribel hadn't just stolen my home, she'd stolen my future, my security, and nearly $3 million. What happens to that money if the sale goes through? I asked. Lowell's expression darkened. It goes to your daughter, as the legal owner of record. Unless we can prove fraud and void the transfer. We spent the next 2 hours building my case. Lowell would file the injunction immediately, request a full investigation into the forged medical documents, and subpoena all records related to the deed transfer. But he warned me Maribel wouldn't go down without a fight. She's already invested in this sale, emotionally and probably financially. She'll hire lawyers, contest everything, drag this through the courts. Are you prepared for that? For your own daughter to become your enemy in public? I thought about Derek, about all the years we'd worked this land together. She became my enemy the day she forged those papers. That evening, I sat on my porch as the sun set over the fields. The chickens had settled into their coop, and the old barn cast long shadows across the yard. Everything was peaceful, just as it had been for decades. But I knew that peace was an illusion. Tomorrow, Lowell would file the injunction, and Maribel would know I was fighting back. My phone rang. Maribel's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mom, I heard you went to see Dr. Pritchard. Her voice was ice cold. Whatever she told you, whatever you're planning, stop. You can't win this. $2.8 million? Maribel is pure evil. Like if you're ready to see Verna fight back. Comment below, do you think Verna can stop the sale in time? Subscribe. The courthouse smelled like old wood and broken dreams. I sat in the hallway outside Judge Cassidy Brennan's chambers, my hands clutching the worn leather purse Derek had given me for our 30th anniversary. Lowell sat beside me, reviewing his notes one final time. Across the hall, Maribel sat with her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit named Trina Wolfe. Maribel wouldn't look at me. She stared straight ahead, her jaw set, her hands folded primly in her lap like she was the victim in all this. When the bailiff called us in, I felt every one of my 74 years weighing on my shoulders. Judge Brennan was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes but a stern mouth. She listened as Lowell presented our emergency motion to halt the property sale. He laid out everything, the forged medical documents, Dr. Pritchard's testimony, the fraudulent deed transfer. He spoke with passion and precision, painting Maribel as a calculating predator who'd victimized her own mother. I watched the judge's face, trying to read her reaction, but she remained impassive. Then Trina Wolfe stood to respond, and my stomach knotted. Your Honor, this is a clear case of an elderly woman suffering cognitive decline and refusing to accept reality. Mrs. Crane did sign over the property willingly. She's simply forgotten doing so, which is precisely why her daughter obtained medical evaluations in the first place. She produced her own stack of documents, rental applications for assisted living facilities in my name, emails I'd supposedly sent expressing confusion about managing the property, even testimony from neighbors claiming I'd seemed disoriented at the local grocery store. I listened in horror as my own life was rewritten into fiction. Yes, I'd inquired about senior housing options years ago when Derek first got sick, thinking I might need somewhere smaller eventually. Yes, I'd once asked the grocery clerk to help me find an item I couldn't locate. Did that make me incompetent? Trina Wolfe was twisting every normal moment of aging into evidence of mental decline. Furthermore, she continued, Mrs. Crane's daughter has her best interests at heart. The sale proceeds will provide comprehensive care for her mother's remaining years. Fighting this is emotional, not rational. Judge Brennan studied the documents before her, and I held my breath. Finally, she spoke. I'm granting a temporary injunction. The property sale is halted for 30 days pending a full investigation into the medical documents' authenticity and the circumstances of the deed transfer. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I nearly sobbed. 30 days. I had 30 days to prove my daughter was a thief and a liar. But as we stood to leave, Trina Wolfe leaned over to Lowell and said loud enough for me to hear, "We'll have her in a psychiatric evaluation by week's end. This fight is over." Outside the courthouse, Maribel finally approached me. The afternoon sun cast harsh shadows across her face, making her look like a stranger. "Mom, please stop this. You're embarrassing yourself and wasting money you don't have on legal fees. Just accept the inevitable." I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, nursed through childhood illnesses, celebrated at her college graduation, and saw someone I no longer recognized. "The only inevitable thing," I said quietly, "is that you'll pay for what you've done." Her eyes flashed with something dark. "We'll see about that." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing on the courthouse steps wondering how we'd reached this moment. That night, as I fed the chickens, I noticed the barn door was slightly open. I always kept it locked. My pulse quickened as I approached. Inside, someone had spray painted across the wall in large red letters, "Crazy old woman, give up." The paint was still wet, dripping down the wood like blood. My hands shook as I called Lowell. "They're trying to intimidate me," I said. He was silent for a moment. "Verna, I think you need to be very careful. Someone who'd forge documents and vandalize property might do worse. Consider staying with a friend until this is settled." But I had no intention of leaving my home. Not now. Not ever. They're calling her crazy and spray painting her barn? This is war. Smash that like button if you're Team Verna. Comment, what do you think they'll do next? 3 days after the hearing, a stranger showed up at my door. She was maybe 40 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail and tired eyes that had seen too much. "Mrs. Crane? My name is Calla Westbrook. I used to work for Cascade Development Corporation. I need to talk to you about your property sale." I hesitated, my hand on the door, remembering the vandalism and Lowell's warning. But something in her expression, desperation mixed with guilt, made me step aside and let her in. We sat at my kitchen table, and Calla pulled out a folder stuffed with documents. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. "I was the project coordinator for your property acquisition. I quit last week because of what I found. Mrs. Crane, your daughter didn't just stumble into this deal, she orchestrated it with Cascade over a year ago. They approached her after doing title research on your land. She's been planning this for at least 18 months. My chest tightened. 1.5 years. While I was grieving Derek, Maribel had been plotting to steal everything. Calla spread papers across the table, emails between Maribel and Cascade executives, discussing how to acquire the property from the elderly owner with minimal legal complications. One email from Maribel made my blood run cold. "My mother is stubborn and sentimental about the farm. We'll need medical documentation of incompetence to streamline the transfer. I have a friend who can handle that. A friend who could forge medical documents." Maribel had conspired with others to destroy me. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked Calla, my voice breaking. She looked down at her hands. "Because I have a mother too. When I realized what we were doing, using forged documents to steal a widow's property, I couldn't be part of it anymore. This isn't real estate development, it's elder abuse. But Mrs. Crane, there's more." She pulled out another document, this one a contract. Maribel isn't just selling for the $2.8 million. She negotiated a separate consulting contract with Cascade for $400,000 to facilitate the acquisition and community relations. She's making over $3 million off your land, and she put it in writing. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. My daughter had sold me out for $3 million. She betrayed her own mother, forged documents, destroyed my life, all for money. Will you testify? I asked Calla. Will you tell a judge what you've told me? She nodded slowly. That's why I'm here. I brought copies of everything, the emails, the contracts, internal memos discussing the fraud. It's all here. But Mrs. Crane, you need to know, Cascade has powerful lawyers and deep pockets. When I go public with this, they'll come after me too. I could lose everything. I reached across the table and took her hand. This stranger was risking her career, maybe her future, to help me, while my own daughter had risked nothing but her soul to betray me. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for having the courage I thought had died in this world. Calla squeezed my hand. We need to get these to your lawyer immediately. And Mrs. Crane? Watch your back. When Cascade realizes I've turned on them, they'll know who I came to. Things are about to get dangerous. Her words echoed in my mind long after she left. That evening, I took the folder Calla had given me and drove straight to Lowell's office. He was working late, as usual, and when he saw what I had, his eyes went wide. This is it, Verna. This is everything we need to prove fraud and conspiracy. With this, we can not only stop the sale but have criminal charges filed against everyone involved, including your daughter. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. My daughter was going to prison. My only child. The little girl who used to help me collect eggs from the hen house was now a criminal who'd tried to rob me blind. Speech balloon $3 million? Maribel is going down. Like this video if you think she deserves everything coming to her. Comment below, should Verna show mercy or go for the kill? Subscribe. The hearing was moved to a larger courtroom to accommodate the media. Somehow, word had leaked about the case, probably through Calla's former colleagues at Cascade, and now reporters lined the hallway, cameras ready. I walked past them with Lowell at my side, ignoring the shouted questions. Inside, Maribel sat at the defendant's table with Trina Wolfe and 2 additional lawyers Cascade had hired. She looked smaller somehow, her usual confidence replaced with something that might have been fear. Our eyes met for just a second, and I saw a flash of something in her expression. Regret? Or just anger at being caught? Judge Brennan entered, and the room fell silent. Lowell stood and presented Calla's evidence, every email, every contract, every damning piece of proof that Maribel had conspired with Cascade to defraud me. The judge's expression grew darker with each document. Then Calla herself took the stand, and I watched my daughter's face drain of color. Calla testified clearly and calmly, explaining how Cascade had approached Maribel, how they'd planned the acquisition strategy, how they discussed forging medical documents to establish incompetence. It was devastating and undeniable. Trina Wolfe tried to attack Calla's credibility during cross-examination, suggesting she was a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. But Calla held firm. I'm here because what we did was criminal. I could stay silent and keep my career, or I could tell the truth and help an innocent woman. I chose the truth. The gallery behind me erupted in whispers. Even Trina Wolfe seemed to deflate slightly. She had no real defense against documented proof of conspiracy. The emails spoke for themselves. Maribel had orchestrated everything. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. Judge Brennan called Maribel to the stand. My daughter stood slowly, smoothing her skirt, and walked to the witness box. She was sworn in, and Lowell approached her with the folder of evidence. "Ms. Gaines, did you or did you not conspire with Cascade Development Corporation to fraudulently obtain your mother's property?" The courtroom held its breath. Maribel looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. Her eyes were wet with tears that might have been real or might have been performance. "I did what I thought was best for my mother," she said, her voice cracking. "She was struggling after Dad died. I was worried she'd hurt herself or lose the property through neglect. Yes, I made mistakes in how I handled it, but my intentions were to protect her." It was a masterful lie, delivered with just enough emotion to seem sincere. But Lowell was ready. He produced the email where Maribel had discussed her $400,000 consulting fee with Cascade executives. "Was stealing $3 million from your mother also meant to protect her?" The courtroom gasped. Maribel's composure shattered. She had no answer. Judge Brennan called for a recess, and I stepped outside for air. The hallway was chaos, reporters, cameras, people I didn't know discussing my life like it was a television show. Then I saw him. Jareth stood near the water fountain, looking pale and shaken. He approached me slowly. "Verna, I swear I didn't know." "Not all of it. Maribel told me you'd agreed to sell, that you wanted to move somewhere smaller. I didn't know about the forged documents or the conspiracy until the lawsuit started." I searched his face for deception but found only guilt. "You lived in my home. You measured my barn for destruction. And you expect me to believe you were innocent?" He flinched like I'd struck him. "I was a coward. I should have questioned her, should have talked to you directly. But I trusted my wife, and that trust made me complicit. I'm sorry, Verna. For what it's worth, I've filed for divorce. I can't be married to someone capable of this." He walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing in the courthouse corridor wondering if anyone in my family had ever truly loved me. When we reconvened, Judge Brennan delivered her ruling with cold precision. The deed transfer was voided. The sale was permanently halted. And criminal charges would be filed against Maribel, Trina Wolfe, and 3 Cascade executives for conspiracy to commit elder fraud. Guilty. Maribel is done. Hit that like button if justice feels sweet. Comment: do you think Verna should forgive Jareth? The media circus lasted for weeks. My farm, my quiet life, became a national story about elder abuse and corporate greed. Reporters camped out at the end of my driveway. News anchors discussed my case during primetime broadcasts. I became the brave grandmother who fought back against her own daughter, a title I never wanted. Lowell handled most of the media requests, but eventually, I agreed to one interview with a local news station, hoping to share my story on my own terms and maybe help other elderly people recognize the signs of financial exploitation. Maribel was arrested 3 days after the ruling. I watched the news coverage from my living room as cameras followed her being led into the police station in handcuffs. She'd posted bail within hours, Cascade likely funded it, but the damage was done. Her face was everywhere, labeled as the daughter who'd tried to steal her mother's farm. She'd lost her job, her husband, her reputation. Everything she'd worked for had crumbled, destroyed by her own greed. I should have felt satisfaction, but instead, I just felt tired. This wasn't the ending I'd wanted for my family. The criminal trial was set for 6 months away, but Maribel's lawyer approached Lowell with a plea deal. She would plead guilty to fraud and conspiracy, serve probation instead of prison time, and pay restitution, every penny of the consulting fees she'd received from Cascade, plus damages. In exchange, the prosecution would drop the most serious charges. Lowell asked if I'd accept the deal. I sat in his office, staring at the papers, thinking about the little girl who used to help me bake cookies. "She's still my daughter," I said quietly. I want her punished, but I don't want her destroyed. Accept the deal. The restitution payments started arriving, $400,000 plus damages totaling $150,000. More money than I'd ever imagined having. But it felt dirty somehow, like blood money. I donated half to a nonprofit that helped elderly victims of financial abuse. The rest I used to repair the farm, new roof on the barn, fresh paint on the house, upgraded equipment. Derek would have been proud. The property was safe now, legally secured in a trust that no one could touch. When I died, it would go to a land conservancy, preserved as farmland forever. Maribel would never inherit a single acre. But money and legal victories couldn't heal the wound in my heart. I'd lost my daughter, not to death, but to greed. She sent one letter during this time, a handwritten note delivered by her new lawyer. Mom, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I got lost somewhere along the way. Dad's death, the pressure to succeed, the money, it all corrupted me. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the daughter you raised is still in here, buried under all the mistakes. I love you. I'm sorry. I read it once, folded it carefully, and put it in the drawer with Derek's letters from when he'd served in Vietnam. One afternoon in late September, I was working in the garden when I heard a car pull up. I looked up to see Calla Westbrook getting out of her sedan. She'd been the prosecution's star witness, and her testimony had sealed Maribel's guilty plea. But testifying had cost her, Cascade had blacklisted her in the industry, and she'd struggled to find work. Mrs. Crane, I hope it's okay that I stopped by. I wanted to see how you were doing. We walked through the farm together, and she marveled at the repairs I'd made. It's beautiful here. Peaceful. I studied her tired face and made a decision that surprised even me. How would you feel about managing this place? Speech balloon Verna donated to charity and offered Calla a job. That's class. Like if you respect how she handled her victory. Comment, would you have forgiven Maribel? Calla moved into the small cottage on the property that Derek and I had built years ago as a guest house. She threw herself into farm management with an energy I hadn't possessed in years. She modernized our operations, started a community-supported agriculture program, and even convinced me to open the farm for weekend tours. Families came to pick vegetables, children fed the chickens, and the land that had almost been turned into a parking lot became a place of joy again. I watched from the porch, amazed at how life could transform even after devastation. The trial concluded in early November. Maribel received 3 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and a permanent felony record. Trina Wolfe was disbarred. 3 Cascade executives faced federal charges and hefty fines. The development company's stock plummeted, and they eventually sold off their assets and dissolved. The justice system had worked, slowly but thoroughly. Yet every night, I still looked at Maribel's letter, still felt the complicated tangle of anger and love that only a mother can understand. Forgiveness was a journey I was still walking, one painful step at a time. One cold December morning, I was feeding the chickens when I saw a familiar car turning into the driveway. My heart clenched. Maribel stepped out, moving slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. She stopped at the gate, not entering without permission. We stood there, mother and daughter, separated by 50 feet in a canyon of betrayal. I didn't know if you'd want to see me, she called out. Her voice was smaller now, stripped of its former arrogance. I'm fulfilling my community service at the senior center. I've been helping elderly people organize their finances. Trying to undo some of the harm I caused. I walked toward her, my arthritic knees protesting in the cold. Up close, I saw how much she'd changed. She'd aged years in these few months, gray streaks in her hair, lines around her eyes, a weariness that came from facing what you'd become. Why did you do it? I asked the question that had haunted me. But she'll need you. Promise me you won't leave her alone. Promise me family will mean something to you. I'm proud of you, son. Always have been, always will be. Love, Dad. Heartsuit. The paper was stained with what looked like tears. Oswin had cried while writing this. And Jareth had left it unopened, had probably kicked it under the bed without a second thought. I pressed the letter to my chest and sobbed like I hadn't sobbed since Oswin died. I called Mr. Whitmore that afternoon, my voice still raw from crying. I found something. Letters from Oswin to Jareth, dozens of them, unopened. He'd been trying to reach our son for years. He'd been telling him about his health, asking him to call, begging for connection. Jareth ignored all of it. Does this change anything legally? There was a long pause, then Mr. Whitmore's gentle voice. Mrs. Calloway, it doesn't change the will, that's already ironclad. But it does provide even more documentation of the pattern of neglect. If Jareth contests, which I doubt he will, this evidence would absolutely destroy any case he tried to make. Keep those letters safe. That night, I sat in Oswin's study and wrote my own letter, not to Jareth, but to the Scholarship Fund Board. I included copies of Oswin's letters, explained the full story of my son's abandonment, and made one request, that every scholarship recipient be required to write one letter per semester to an elderly or sick family member. Because my husband died reaching out to a son who wouldn't reach back, I wrote. And maybe, somehow, this can prevent another family from breaking the way ours did. Maybe these students can learn what my son never did, that love is action, not intention. That showing up matters. That some chances don't come twice. I sealed the envelope, addressed it to Mr. Whitmore's office, and felt something close to peace settle over me. Oswin's love hadn't been wasted. It would live on through strangers who actually understood its value. Through people who would show up, who would write back, who would care. And Jareth? Jareth would spend the rest of his life knowing he'd thrown away something precious that he could never get back. That seemed like exactly the right ending to me for months. Why wasn't love enough? Maribel's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she gripped the fence. Because I was drowning, Mom. Drowning in debt you didn't know about. Jareth made bad investments. We were losing everything, the house, the cars, the lifestyle. When Cascade approached me, I saw a solution to all our problems. And I told myself you'd be better off anyway, that you were struggling alone out here. I convinced myself I was helping you while helping myself. But I was just a coward and a thief. Her honesty was raw and painful. Part of me wanted to turn away, to let her suffer as I had suffered. But another part, the part that had rocked her as a baby, nursed her through childhood fevers, celebrated every milestone, that part remembered who she'd been before greed had poisoned her soul. You destroyed everything your father and I built. You betrayed the trust we placed in you. You made me doubt my own mind. My voice shook with emotion I'd held back for months. How do I forgive that? How do I look at you and not see the woman who tried to steal my life? Maribel sobbed openly now, her shoulders shaking. You don't have to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that losing you has been worse than losing everything else combined. Worse than the criminal record, worse than the divorce, worse than the shame. I lost my mother because of my own greed, and I have to live with that forever. She wiped her face with her sleeve, looking suddenly like the little girl who used to cry when she scraped her knees. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become someone you could be proud of again. Even if you never see it. I stood there in the cold December air, my breath making clouds between us. Behind me, the farm stretched out, the barn Derek had built, the fields we'd worked together, the life we'd created. It had almost been destroyed, but it had survived. I had survived. And maybe, just maybe, there was room for redemption even in the darkest betrayal. "I'm not ready to forgive you," I said finally. "I don't know if I ever will be completely. But you're still my daughter. And your father wouldn't want me to give up on you entirely." Maribel looked up, hope flickering in her red-rimmed eyes. "There's a church support group I attend now," I continued. "For families recovering from financial abuse. They meet Thursday evenings. If you're serious about changing, about understanding what you did, you could come with me sometime. Not today. Not soon. But, eventually." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a door left slightly open, a possibility of healing somewhere down the long road ahead. Maribel nodded, unable to speak. She placed her hand on the fence post, and after a moment's hesitation, I placed mine near it, not touching, but close. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not slamming the door completely." She left then, driving slowly down the gravel road, and I stood watching until her car disappeared. Speech balloon Verna left the door open just a crack. Is that mercy or weakness? Like if you think she made the right choice. Comment, could you ever forgive your child for this? Spring came to the farm like a benediction. The fields turned green, the apple trees blossomed, and life reasserted itself in 1,000 small ways. Calla had expanded our CSA program, and now 40 families depended on our vegetables each week. We'd hired 2 part-time workers, college students studying agriculture who treated the land with respect. The farm wasn't just surviving anymore, it was thriving. And I, at 75 years old, had discovered that the sweetest justice wasn't revenge or punishment, it was living well despite those who tried to destroy you. The Land Conservancy Trust I'd established held a dedication ceremony in April. Local officials came, along with families who'd visited the farm, and Calla, who'd become like a daughter to me in ways both wonderful and complicated. The mayor gave a speech about preserving agricultural heritage. A plaque was unveiled near the old oak tree where Derek and I had been married 50 years ago, Crane Family Farm preserved in perpetuity as a testament to resilience, justice, and the enduring power of the land. I stood there thinking about all the hands that had worked the soil, my grandfather Oswin, my parents, Derek, me, and now a new generation learning its lessons. Maribel didn't attend, though I'd sent her an invitation. She was still keeping her distance, still doing her community service, still trying to rebuild her shattered life. But she'd started therapy and sent me updates every few weeks, nothing heavy, just brief notes about her progress. She'd gotten a job doing bookkeeping for a nonprofit, humble work that paid a fraction of what she'd earned before. Jareth had finalized their divorce, taken his share of what remained, and moved to Oregon. Maribel was alone now, truly alone, in a way she'd never been. Sometimes I thought that was her real punishment, the loneliness of having destroyed her own family. In May, she asked if she could visit again. This time, I said yes. She came on a Sunday morning, bringing nothing but herself, no excuses, no justifications, just a woman trying to make amends. We walked through the fields together, and I showed her the new greenhouse Calla had designed. "It's beautiful, Mom," she said quietly. "You've made it even better than it was." We stopped at Derek's grave. I buried him in the small family cemetery near the creek, where generations of cranes rested. Maribel knelt and placed flowers on her father's headstone. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I dishonored everything you built." We sat on the porch afterward, drinking sweet tea like we'd done years ago when life was simpler. "I'm proud of what you're doing," I said finally. "The community service, the therapy, the honest work. You're finding your way back." Maribel looked at me with surprise and gratitude. I have so far to go still. But knowing you see the effort means everything. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun move across the fields. It wasn't complete forgiveness, that might take years, or might never fully come. But it was peace. It was the beginning of something new built on the ruins of what had been broken. That evening, after Maribel left, I stood in the barn where someone had once spray-painted "Crazy Old Woman, Give Up." Calla had painted over it, but I could still see the faint outline of those cruel words beneath the fresh white paint. I ran my hand over the wall, thinking about everything that had happened. They'd tried to break me. They'd stolen my property, forged documents, questioned my sanity, and destroyed my family. But I was still here. The farm was still here. And somehow, against impossible odds, we'd survived. That was the sweetest justice of all, not their punishment, but my persistence. I walked back to the house as fireflies began their nightly dance across the fields. Inside, I pulled out Derek's old letters from Vietnam and Maribel's apology note, placing them side by side on the kitchen table. One represented the love that had built this life, the other represented the betrayal that had nearly destroyed it. Both were part of my story now, woven together in ways I was still learning to understand. I'd fought for my farm and won. I'd faced down my own daughter and survived. And now, in my 75th year, I was learning the hardest lesson of all, that justice without mercy is just another kind of prison, and true freedom comes from choosing what kind of person you'll be even after others have shown you their worst. I chose to keep living, keep loving, keep hoping. And in that choice, I found my victory, sweet, hard-won, and completely my own. Speech balloon, it's over. Verna won her farm, found peace, and left room for healing. Like if this story moved you. Comment below, what was your favorite moment? Share this with someone who needs to hear this story of resilience. And subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Thank you for watching Verna's journey. Justice truly is sweetest when it comes with grace. Red Heart Sheaf of Rice Balance Scale.